We tested it on the survey, and this one couple said, when, we're at odds with each other, obviously it just makes such a difference when we touch pinkies. And I went, what? Can you go back and tell me what you're talking about?
Hey, Brian Goins here. And if you've been around marriage material podcasts, been to a conference, if you've read any books, you're going to come across Gary Chapman's 5 love languages. I won't recount them all right now. I just know that food is not one of them. And I personally think that's my favorite love language. So anyway, but what we're going to learn today is that there's another language that highly happy couples are fluent in. And this language, fortunately, doesn't require Rosetta Stone. It's pretty easy to learn. And if you listen all the way to the end of this episode, you'll find it's actually pretty silly. I don't know if you guys have heard this phrase before, but they said that scientists have proven, you're a scientist, you're a researcher, researchers have proven that the toughest years in marriage are those following the wedding.
Yes, for sure.
It's usually a joke, but...
Okay.
So Brian does that joke all the time, and
everybody's like,
Everyone's like... They don't get it at first, but it's like, oh, yeah. So every year after a wedding, you're going to...
Oh, those...
yeah, the toughest years.
Okay.
See, sometimes it's a slow release joke. Like you say it.
Maybe you should stop telling that joke.
I was assuming you meant like literally the
Poor
few
Shanti
years.
was like, yeah,
that is actually statistically true. The first 4 years after...
Right.
Yeah, okay,
no, he says all the years.
Okay, all the years. I missed that. All right.
I just realized, and I was thinking about this in my head for the last minute while you were talking. I was a little distracted because I realized that I did not introduce my wife to this podcast. And so we were thinking, we were right in the same line. She wrote down on my post-it note, introduce me. And she put a question mark, and it's like, this isn't a question. She's like, no, introduce me. Make sure they're on.
Absolutely.
And so we're back with Jen. And so we're so excited that Jen is here with us to talk about this, because this is one I would say is one of your favorite ones of the chapters that she wrote, right?
Yes.
I remember when you told me about it.
Yeah, whenever I read Shanti's books, I always feel like I'm enlightened. I just get...
Aww,
yes,
so
thank you so much for that.
This chapter of your book where we talk about the secret, you use the porcupine problem. It's like the porcupine problem. How does a couple get close again when one or both spouses have been bristling with hurt feelings and anger? Which we do.
Yes.
We have that, right?
We all get that.
And so when we're bristling with each other, how do porcupines come back together? It's the old joke, very carefully. And so we want to talk about how do we very carefully, when we're bristled with anger, we're not denying the fact that we're angry. In fact, we talked about that in Secret 3, that highly happy couples go to bed mad. We're not denying the anger. In fact, it's helpful for them to acknowledge the anger. So I want to go to that moment where we're at odds with each other. Is there any kind of a secret or clue that highly happy couples will do in order to dissipate some of that anger?
Yes. And this was something that it actually took us a minute to realize what we were hearing. And it finally clicked in one of, I don't know, we'd probably interviewed 20 or 30 people at this point, couples, highly happy couples. And this one couple said, when, we're at odds with each other, obviously it just makes such a difference when we touch pinkies. And I went, what? Can you go back and tell me what there you go. And tell me what you're talking about. And they're like, oh, well, we have this thing, if we've been at odds and we've been, they didn't say porcupine, but if we'd been, bristling with that hurt and anger, at some point, one of us will come up to the other and like extend the pinky to the other. And if the other goes, okay, fine, and touches pinkies, that means we're okay. That means like, the argument is done. Like, we may still have the issue. That may still be there. But the actual, the hurt feelings we've made up. And I thought, that's interesting. And then all of a sudden, as soon as that couple said that, I went, wait a minute. I've heard that from all these other couples, and I just didn't know what I was hearing.
Yeah.
And so then we started asking, and then we tested it on the survey. I'm like, wow, this is a huge deal. I think it's more than 70% of the happiest couples do this.
Man.
And the number is much smaller for everybody else.
Yeah.
It obviously made us think about, do we do this? Because we feel like we're a highly happy couple.
Right.
And do we do this? And so it's just a wonderful thought. And
so
it's very interesting.
Well, do you?
And I'd say before Jen answers that, because it is, I think what she's picking up is really something I don't want the audience to miss. And that is This is a super practical way.
Yes.
Because we read, do not let the sun go down in your anger. And then it says, be kind and be harmonious. And all of us hear those words and they kind of roll off our, the fruit of the Spirit about love, patience, kindness, peace, self-control. We hear that and we go, but I don't know how to do that when emotions are flooding my brain. I'm not really sure exactly what to do. Because I know for me as a guy, I struggle. I'm that slow processor. When my emotions are getting in the way of logic, I don't know what to do in that moment. This made me realize, there are actually super practical and funny ways to remind each other that we're in this together. We see the pain, we see the bristles, we see the hurt, but I still love you.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really cool, all the different ones. And we had to think through, because you use pinkies. So give us a couple other examples of ones before we give ours. Give us a couple other examples of the ones when you're reading back through and doing all these interviews that you started picking up on this theme of, wait, all these couples are doing kind of weird things to remind each other they love each other in the moment of anger.
Exactly. And it took me a minute. One of my favorite ones, I just thought this was hilarious, was they said that one of them will come up and play bumper cars, almost like they'll bump the other person, at the kitchen sink or, whatever, walking through the living room, and they'll bump the other. And then a minute later, if the other person comes back and bumps them, that's okay, I accept your apology. We're good.
Right. Right.
Cute. One of the funniest ones, I was so cracking up. I don't think I actually put this in the book. We were talking to this really very intense big guy, right? And he was the husband of a highly happy couple. And he's this huge, honestly, I want to say 6'6", 6'7", and 300 pounds, big dude, And we said, do you have this? And he got so red. And I'm like, okay, now you have to tell me.
Yes.
You have to. And I'm like, this is all confidential. I'm not going to out you. I just want to know what it is that you do. And he's like, well, my wife meows. And then if I meow back, that means we're okay.
Oh, my goodness.
That is awesome.
I can just see him, too, just kind of cowering down. That's what unless you're watching this on YouTube, you're not seeing Shanti just cowers down.
It was so funny. Oh, my gosh. I'm sorry. So what were some of your,
man.
I mean, you've heard a bunch of these.
Yes. Some of the ones in the book were, I like the question that one couple said that says, you know what? We deserve each other. And then it kind of, what I like about that one is that you're saying we're both not perfect.
Yeah,
right,
we're both sinners.
We both have issues. And this happens maybe in this time it was your issue or it was my issue or it's both of us. But you know what? We deserve each other. We're both so terrible that we just deserve each other.
Yeah.
But then that makes us laugh and realize we do kind of deserve each other. And then it brings them back. And so I really liked that one. I thought that one was really sweet.
I just remembered one couple, I know I'm not going to get this exactly right, but one of the ones is that one person would text the other, Eros. Eros. Why?
Yeah, how are you spelling that?
Y-R-R-O-S.
Y-R-R-O-S.
And if the other person texted, because sometimes, you can try to touch the pinky and the other person's like, I'm not there yet.
Right.
Right? Okay. Right? It doesn't necessarily mean that the other person is ready. And so if there was a silence, it was okay, we're not there yet. But if they text back Eros, then they were okay. And it turns out it's sorry backwards.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was
good. Eli's going, our sound engineer, she is shaking her going, I might use that.
So,
Eros.
It's the thing is, it was different for everybody. Everybody's thing was different.
Yeah.
And so, but it was just kind of the first touch. It was a way to bring you back without having to have a big talk or whatever.
Yes,
Tell us more about that. Is that what it is?
It's just literally saying, again, that issue could still very much probably is still there, but we're okay. We've reconnected.
Yeah.
And it's like a psychological, emotional, spiritual back to oneness.
Yes.
That's so good.
And I think too, for me, I'm thinking about it, and maybe you can confirm this, but they're usually kind of funny.
Yes.
Which
sometimes.
humor, sometimes. Yeah. But a lot of times it's either a touch or it's a humor thing, and you end up laughing about it. But that always breaks the ice. that you just take away some of that seriousness to break the ice. And then you can be serious. You still might really have to be serious, but it's just a good start to break the ice and say, okay, I deserve you, kind of like that.
Right.
But yeah, so ours, we have a couple.
I'm dying here.
I'm actually seeing if there's something. Can we talk about something else before we talk about ours? Can we push it off just a little bit?
One of ours is really silly, kind of like the meow. And then we do have two. We feel like we kind of have two. We've talked about this because we read the book and we've
And you
shared
talk about this at your marriage events.
Yes, we do use this at most of our marriage events. We talk about this as just a little secret. Like if you don't have one, start one, because then you can utilize it that next week or whatever. And okay, so our first one, I'll tell the embarrassing one first.
Yeah. Okay.
And that is we have I don't even know if people are going to get this, but here we go. So we have a dog that we adore, and his name is Jammer.
He's about 12 years old.
He's getting older now, but we've had him for his whole life.
He's so cute.
So he's a big part of our life for the last 12 years. That's a big part. And our kids, we say his name in a million different ways. And so it's like Jammers. We just say all these weird, we just love him.
They pluralize it for some reason. I don't know
Jammers.
who started it. I think it was Palmer, our middle, that started calling him Jammers.
And so anyways, so we'll just say our dog's name to each other in a silly voice. And it brings us back together. And it makes us laugh more than anything. And that's where I think the humor part is. It makes us laugh. And so we can be like, okay.
And nobody else would get that. And it sounds like even if we were to reproduce it right now, it would sound stupid.
Yeah. But
it's our
the
inside
two
thing.
Of you.
Right.
It is you guys.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
Yes. And then we have a physical one. So that one's with a word and it makes us laugh. So Brian, we from our very beginning of our marriage, if we'll hug or touch each other and if I pat him, he feels like that's kind of motherly and it's very demeaning. And so he's like, I hate it when do not pat me. And he does not like the pat. We call it the pat. And so even sometimes when I'm hugging him and I'll start patting him, he'll be like, that's the pat. Please don't do that. But it's funny. I obviously have respected that and don't pat him all the time. But if we're in a fight, in order to kind of break the silence, or he'll do it to me or I'll do it to him. And so it's kind of another thing where like, oh, don't even go there. But then we laugh about it and it's a physical touch.
Jeff will.
What is your, forget us. How about the experts?
No. Jeff will come up to me. And this is, by the way, this is part of the, issue is that we recognized we had been doing this. Like you recognized you had been doing this. You just didn't realize
after the fact, right?
Like, yeah. And so Jeff, usually in our marriage, there is something that I've done, whatever, and Jeff is dealing with anger. He wants to withdraw, whatever. And then I'm left like chasing him around the house going, what's wrong? What'd I do? That's sort of a crazy dynamic, but that's us. So he's like, escaping. And then at some point, maybe it's an hour later, sometimes it might be a day later, but whatever it is, he'll come back up to me and like shove me with his shoulder and go, you done being mad yet? It's like, I'm going to kill you, but okay, it makes me laugh. And that's his way of saying, I'm sorry, I'm back. Let's talk
really
about
good.
It. Yeah.
That's really good. I wonder if, Bruce, I'm going to put our producer on the
spot.
On the spot. Bruce, do you and Maria have one?
I feel like I'm letting you down. I can't think of what we have.
Really?
Other than, like, when it's all settled, it's a reassurance of, I'll say, you have unlimited lives. Like, for, like, in Mario or something.
Yeah.
You get to start over.
That's so
so it's like,
oh my God.
What do you mean you don't have one? Like, you just threw the trump card down. You have unlimited lives.
Cheat code. So it's like, it's all right.
Wow.
Okay, as I'm sitting here, maybe if people are listening to this, they won't see the reaction. Like I was like, oh, that's cool, Bruce. That's really fun. But these women that I'm sitting next to are like, why did you feel that way? First of all, why did you feel like it was
so sweet? I mean, that is just such an incredible reassurance for every woman who's like, really? Do you really love me? It's such a good
you
reassurance.
both like went, aww. And so Bruce, I mean, not everybody remembers Mario. So that is a video game. I love like Mario Kart and all that stuff. And so like, did you come up with that on your own?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. My brain kind of is stuck being an 8-year-old, so I just think in terms of Mario. And yeah, I mean, it was pretty early in our marriage, and I was like, yeah, don't worry about it. You've got unlimited free lives.
Unlimited free lives. What a great sign. Shanti's still sighing.
I know.
It's going to go in her next book.
It's going to go in my next book.
I'm sure
Bruce.
of it.
That's awesome.
Well, I hope you've been enjoying this season of Married with Benefits, and it is super easy for you to support this podcast. All you really need to be able to do is press 2 buttons, like and subscribe. Leave a review, leave a comment. Let us know what you're leaning into, what's encouraging you, what you feel that is helping your marriage. We would love to hear those comments. So that's it. That's super easy, and it would help us out a lot. All right, back to the episode. There's probably people listening going, I don't know if we have one, or should we develop one, or how do you find one? Like, what are the aspects of a good sign?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, it's got to be between the two of you, right? Like it's a private thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that like your thing with Jammer, like it would make no sense to anybody else.
Right.
It might work
right?
within our family.
Yes.
And
And
kids
okay,
would
so could you
probably
do?
know.
Sorry to interrupt you. Could you do this with kids too? I guess.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
I've never studied that one, but let me do a 2-year study and I'll get back to you.
Yes, no, you don't have to do that. But I think it would work with our
Of
kids
highly happy
too.
families.
Yeah,
you
I
know.
would think so.
I think it would work with our kids.
I would think so
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
But yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So it's gotta. It has to be something that's the two of you, and it has to be authentic to the two of you, right? I mean, like it's not something you can just make up and make the other person do. That doesn't. That's not the way it works.
It
right?
feels cheesy. Yeah.
Because the whole point is that you two are coming back together and you're reassuring one
Right.
another. So that's the first thing. The second one is that honestly, it's usually something playful. Every now and then I heard a pretty serious one, something that was pretty deep or whatever. Like I think You've Got Unlimited Lives gets closer
Right.
to that. Like, this is forever. So I think that, but I think usually it's pretty playful and it's usually funny, kind of gets you laughing. And then the third principle, which is really, really important, let me emphasize this. This is the only secret in the whole book that both people have to do. All of these things that we found, one of the things that was so encouraging is that all of them work if only one person does them. You can believe the best. You can try those little things,
Right.
et cetera.
That is significant.
It is significant because it means that you can focus on doing what you can do, right? This is the only exception to that because by definition, it has to be reciprocal. By definition, if you've extended the pinky out and your spouse is like, I'm not there yet, okay.
Which is good to get.
That's okay.
That's part of the deal, right? That's part of the pact that you're making with this person is that I may not be ready. So I'm going to give you permission to
absolutely
have some time, have your time out, whatever you need until you come back and return the pinky.
Yeah, I'm going to leave you hanging with that meow.
With that Jammers.
Yeah, or the
Exactly.
pat. Like,
Yeah.
Or maybe you might move away.
And you're like,
don't pat me. Not yet.
I'm not
We're
ready for the pat yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's real, right?
Well,
that's
and you talk
the way it
about how
works.
this reciprocal nature really is what you call a lover's bypass. What is it? What do you mean by that term, lover's bypass?
Well, I mean, this is something that basically is bypassing the fact that we are at odds about something and that something is still there, right? But we're going to go around it. We're still going to be okay. We're coming back together. And you know what? When you've come back together around something, it actually makes it easier.
Yeah.
To be able to deal with it.
And I want to be careful here because I think somebody could take this out of context. Like you can't bypass everything.
Correct.
You know,
absolutely.
And
absolutely.
so there's probably some things that we go, yeah, this doesn't mean that you say Jammers after you find out that, your spouse just looked at porn again.
Yeah, right.
This isn't the time where all of a sudden you just come back or they broke trust in a significant way. Like we're not talking about that. We're
No,
talking
we're
about
not.
those things where you're just you've done something stupid, you've said something mean, you're
at odds about some
Right.
decision, right? Like you had told the story earlier of, you were trying to wonder whether to move to Atlanta years ago, trying to figure out what job to take and had 2 different opinions.
Right.
That is definitely not the, oh yeah, we'll just touch pinkies and,
Right.
It'll be
Right.
fine. All that
Right.
will go away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good caveat to give because there are people that are listening that are facing really difficult things and to know that this on either side, you can't just put out the pinky and have everything be okay.
But let's just use an example. Okay. Suppose that you two, this was years ago when you were thinking of moving and taking that job and you were at odds and you're angry, you're upset, you've got a 4-hour drive, you're crying, you're angry, and this is not going to like be the reconciliation, right? However, let's suppose that the next day you're still dealing with that, and there's some argument over what to do about, getting the kids to school. And I thought you were driving. I'm always the one that's driving. You may come back from that and touch pinkies or do the equivalent, right? You'd say your Jammers thing, because that's something that is manageable. And it is something that isn't that bigger issue that is kind of a life issue that has to be discussed.
I think that's just good to point out, because it does remind me of that when you think about those three things, again, the good aspects of being a sign, let me just sum those up. Private, it's just between the two, wouldn't make sense to other people. Usually playful, but it feels natural. It's something that feels like, okay, this is not manipulated or contrived, but it's something that's unique to both of us and playful. And it's got to be reciprocal. It's got to be done by both parties. And so it reminds, as we were talking about this, it reminds me that that's a little sign language. God does the same thing with us when you think about the sign of the covenant. He has a sign that he is basically saying to his people, I love you. I'm not going to leave you, that I'm going to give you a sign. And he does that throughout Scripture. It could be the rainbow. It could be communion is a sign that, of Christ's sacrifice for us. He will never leave us or forsake us. And so it reminds me, we talk about An Art of Marriage, that new series that Family Life has produced. The second session is on with this Hebrew word called dabak, which means to cleave or to cling. And it's that idea of that's what we do in marriage. We're going to choose to leave our parents, our mother and our father, and we're going to cleave to one another. And I'm going to cleave to you in the good times and the bad times. And so having something that's going to say, a reminder of that we're okay. I love you. I'm not going to leave you, even though this is really frustrating right now. Even though you're poking me right now like a porcupine, I'm going to have some sign of our covenant. And I think that's huge.
That's beautiful. I mean, I'd never even thought of it until you mentioned this before we actually started recording, of this sort of sign language, the touching pinkies, the saying the funny word, the sending the funny text, whatever it is, playing bumper cars in the living room, that is a sign of the covenant in marriage between the two of you. I mean, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I think somebody sent us this verse, 1 John 3:18, my little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but in deed and in truth. And so it is the sense of, you can say you love me, but to have a sign that you love me, there's something deeper about that I think is really cool.
What people could do is maybe as a point to their wedding ring.
Right.
Oh, that's good.
Just be like,
which is a sign of the covenant.
A sign of the covenant. It's a circle, and it's on your hand. It's permanent. You get to look at it. So maybe that could be a fun sign that you'd be like, hey, we're in this. Let's come back together.
Yeah.
Well, some people listening to this, in terms of what are the little things that we have to do, right? Like, because that's one of those little step-by-steps all in the right direction. How do we actually get there? Some people are going to need to actually go, how do we come back together? Because that helps it not just float, right? Like, how do we, even if the issue isn't resolved, how do we get resolved, right? Like, how do we feel together? And if you don't have something like that, do think about, maybe ask yourself the question, okay, how can I convey I'm sorry or we're okay without actually saying it? Okay. How can I do that? And it's got to be something natural. It's got to be something that, your spouse is like, yeah, that works. But in doing that process, my bet is that a lot of people listening to this will realize they already have something like that, and that they didn't kind of realize, oh, that matters, right? Because we don't realize it. And yet many of us do. And if we do have that kind of sort of already, we can do it more purposefully and use that.
That's what I love about the research that you come out with. It's like you discovered it. There's something that was already happening. And too often we don't discover the right things that we're already doing. It's easy to point out the gaps, the weaknesses, the problems. We can see all of that. But I think the enemy wants to keep us from seeing the right things. And so there's probably a right thing you're doing. And if you just think about it for a little bit, I bet you'll just go, yep, let's do that. Or you might go, oh, but what if we did this? And you come up with it together. And so if you don't have one, ask yourself, how can you convey that? I'm sorry. We're okay. And maybe it is, you said without saying it, it could be, maybe it's a phrase or something like that. It could be a lot of different things. As I think about this one especially, it is one of the most fun secrets that we get a chance to talk about and do. And so here's what I would love to hear from our listeners is see if you can top one of those signs. Like,
oh, there you go.
We've got a lot of funny ones. The meow,
ideas,
the bumper cars, all those, the pat, whatever it is, send us in the funny one or the cool one or the different one that you do.
Or how it brought you back together.
Yeah.
There's a great story that it was the beginning of bringing you back together. Would be a pretty cool story to hear.
Yeah, we'd love to hear it. So thanks so much. That's another great secret. I can't wait to the next one. Thanks for joining us for this episode. If you enjoy this podcast, please hit like or subscribe. And please leave a review or a comment. It just helps get the word out to more couples so that they could find hope for their own marriage. And listen, if you haven't picked up Shanti's book that we're talking about all this season long, The Surprising Secrets of Highly Happy Marriages, you're going to want to get that and maybe grab one to give away because that's really what we're about here at Family Life. We want to help you experience oneness so that you could impact your corner of the world. And listen, we've got a lot more help and hope for your marriage and family at FamilyLife.com. You can find other articles, you can find podcasts, you can find shows, small group resources. You'll want to check that out at FamilyLife.com.